We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
The Kennedy Space Center on Florida's East Coast is the world's most famous spaceport. It is a window into the past, present, and future of space exploration. A monument to man's great dream of reaching the stars. Today, the shuttle fleet embarks on thunderous journeys into the heavens, pushing our reach ever outward. From here, our astronauts took those first daring steps into the unknown. From adjacent Cape Canaveral, manned and unmanned spacecraft have sailed to our solar system's most distant planets. Located within the 140,000 acres of the Kennedy Space Center is Spaceport, USA, where millions of visitors annually experience firsthand the thrill and excitement of America's space program. The Rocket Garden, with its display of historic rockets and related space hardware, is a popular attraction. Children take a special delight in these towering monuments to our accomplishments in space. The largest of the rockets on display in the garden is the powerful Saturn V. This giant rocket boosted the first manned Apollo missions into Earth orbit, as well as the 3 missions to the Skylab orbiting station. It also launched the American Apollo spacecraft that joined with the Russian Soyuz craft in space. However, as large as this rocket is, it is dwarfed by the great Saturn V that you may see later on your tour of the Space Center. This full-sized lunar module and other exhibits located throughout the center help visitors better understand the challenges and accomplishments of our space program. A stroll around Spaceport, USA gives you a unique opportunity to let your imagination run wild. Walking through the crew access arm lets you imagine how the Apollo crew must have felt. They too walked through this very same access arm, climbed into a command module mounted atop the most powerful rocket ever built, knowing that soon they would be soaring toward the moon. The visitor program begins at Spaceport Central, where NASA, through its concessionaire, TW Recreational Services, has completed a multi-million-dollar expansion, all at no cost to the taxpayer. At the information counter, you can have questions answered before you begin your tour. In 1989, Spaceport USA opened its $3.5 million exhibit, Satellites and You. It is a 55-minute experience designed to show the visitor how satellites affect his daily life. Featuring a visit to a space station, weather station, and a communication room, it also gives people a view of our Earth. This exhibit is one that gives the visitor a preview of the Kennedy Space Center's Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. It is home to more endangered species of birds, mammals, and reptiles than any other refuge in the continental United States. In the Gallery of Spaceflight, you can walk through the pages of space exploration history. This is a Mercury capsule, the spacecraft that transported our early astronauts into outer space. It was unmanned and was the first Mercury capsule launched. It is similar to the one that carried John Glenn on the first U.S. orbital flight. The early spacesuits worn by our astronauts were ingenious in design and capability, but they were antiquated by later improvements. During those early years, continuous research and development eventually resulted in the creation of the sophisticated Apollo spacesuits. This research continues, and today's suits are the most efficient ever designed. The two-man Gemini program followed the Mercury. This craft, its heat shield scorched during re-entry, was used during the Gemini 9 orbital flight in June 1966. The Gemini space capsule represented a significant improvement in technology and operation over the earlier Mercury spacecraft. It provided systems permitting two spacecraft to rendezvous and dock, and enabled astronauts to perform new functions in space. This is the actual Apollo command module that docked with the Russian Soyuz spacecraft on July 15, 1975. This spacecraft is similar to those which journeyed to the moon. Suspended overhead is a full-size model of the Soyuz spacecraft. Together, the U.S. and USSR achieved an unprecedented milestone for international cooperation in space. Astronauts and vehicles from our two nations joined to work together in space. The powerful Saturn moon rocket and its Apollo space vehicle have been reproduced here in this 1/10th scale model. It has been cut away to show the inner workings of this intricate craft. Skylab was America's first space station and one of man's most important space projects. This model of a multiple docking adapter shows the area in which astronauts spent months performing countless experiments and operating an array of telescopes. Skylab was launched first by a Saturn V with a two-story orbital workshop. Then, the first of 3 two-man crews was launched atop a Saturn 1B to begin living in the orbiting laboratory. The remarkable accomplishments of Skylab and its crews included proof that people could live and work in space for extended periods of time. They collected large amounts of data on the Sun, the Earth, and our solar system. Despite plans to save it from the pull of Earth's gravity, Skylab plunged into the atmosphere in 1979 after 6 years of service and 34,984 orbits around the Earth. Astronaut crews practiced at the Kennedy Space Center using this vehicle in preparation for lunar missions. The actual lunar rover roamed the hills and valleys of the Moon with a top speed of 10 miles per hour. None of the rovers could be returned, and today 5 are in inventory here on Earth, and 3 sit silently on the lunar surface, awaiting man's return. The Gallery of Spaceflight contains many exhibits, none more interesting than this one of an actual moon rock returned by Apollo 17. The role of unmanned spacecraft in man's conquest of space has not always received the credit that it deserves. The achievements of these spacecraft are legendary, and even today they continue exploring the outer limits of our solar system, sending back large amounts of new data. The technological advances made from manned and unmanned craft in NASA's space program have resulted in incalculable benefits to mankind in down-to-earth fields such as manufacturing, medicine, communications, and even everyday items found in the home, such as ceramic cookware. This full-scale model depicts the highly successful Viking Mars lander that returned such a large amount of important data from the Martian surface that our entire concept of the red planet changed. In the future, the information obtained will be used in developing other Martian projects, such as a manned mission to the planet. The Galaxy Center building has been built on the edge of one of Kennedy's many water channels, an area that contains a large variety of fascinating wildlife. There are 2 theaters and several important educational exhibits within the center. There are also a number of displays here centered around the space shuttle. This 1/15th scale model enables you to better visualize the complex control systems of the entire shuttle package. This replica of the flight deck of the shuttle enables you to peer inside and see the clusters of instruments that control the flight of this, the most amazing of all spacecraft. The Hubble Space Telescope is one of NASA's most ambitious space projects. It is designed to be placed into orbit by the space shuttle. When it is launched, it will provide views of our universe that have never been seen before. The NASA Art Gallery contains paintings and sculptures that were commissioned by NASA. The only exhibit of its kind, the skilled work of these many artists are displayed here for the public's enjoyment. The gallery contains the world's largest collection of space art. NASA and TW Recreational Services are continuously improving facilities, services, and exhibits within Spaceport USA with new features. The Galaxy Center contains 2 theaters. The 500-seat Galaxy Theater is free to the public and presents a widescreen 20-minute short feature titled The Boy from Mars. The show that you will not want to miss is the ever-popular IMAX presentation, The Dream is Alive. This giant screen spectacle is shown on a screen which is 5.5 stories tall and 70 feet wide. Astronauts say it's the next best thing to being on a space flight. An array of gifts and remembrances of U.S. space flights and ample necessities for young astronauts await the visitor here. There's a variety of foods available at both the Orbit Cafeteria and the Lunchpad restaurant. You may feel a tinge of excitement when a spaceman appears on the scene. The most engrossing part of your visit to Spaceport USA is about to begin. A thrilling tour of the Kennedy Space Center aboard a modern double-decker bus. These vehicles, with their full-view windows, let you enjoy the scenery as you travel about the center. The tour buses pass the headquarters building, the administrative center for all spaceport activities, and the O&C building where Space Lab is processed. Your first tour stop is at the Flight Crew Training Building. Inside are large and complex vehicles that enabled our astronauts to reach the moon. This is an actual lunar module. The lunar rover was carried by the lunar module and offloaded in this fashion. After months of intense training in command and lunar simulators, the astronauts were ready for their historic round-trip journeys to the moon.
We're now in the approach phase, everything looking good. Altitude 4,200.
Houston, you're a go for landing, over. 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Big shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 20, down a half, 30 seconds forward, good. Okay. Contact light. Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The world watched with amazement as our astronauts bounded about on the first extraterrestrial body ever visited by man. A simulated firing room, modeled after the one that was used during the Apollo moon landings, is located within the Flight Crew Training Building. Here you will experience the excitement of an audio-visual show that recreates events related to the Apollo 11 mission. Your tour continues through the Kennedy Space Center. The Kennedy Space Center is located on Merritt Island, which is located between Cape Canaveral and the Florida mainland. Many people are not aware that much of the land area of the center is a national wildlife refuge, where nature lives in harmony with our nation's space program. Although it is not part of the tour, many visitors take the time to visit and enjoy the adjacent wildlife refuge. The Space Center embraces 140,000 acres of land and water. Birdwatchers will find the great variety of birds here most enjoyable. They include the rare bald eagle, America's national symbol. From the land or the sea, it is difficult not to see the Vehicle Assembly Building. It is referred to simply as the VAB. In this immense building, the huge Saturn V moon rocket was prepared for launch. Today, the space shuttle and its components are refurbished, assembled, and prepared for flight here. This is an actual Saturn V, the largest and most powerful rocket ever built. It launched our Apollo spaceships and crews to the moon. Your tour bus will stop within a short distance of this giant vehicle, allowing you to get out and stand next to it. Only then can you begin to fully comprehend its great size. As high as a 36-story building, weighing in at over 6 million pounds, 13 times the weight of the Statue of Liberty and 60 feet higher, it shook the countryside with its deafening 7.5 million pounds of thrust at liftoff.
1, 0, all engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on proper heading.
The bicentennial symbol and the American flag were painted on the building in 1976. Each star measures 6 feet across, and the long stripes are about 210 feet in length. The shuttles are transported from the VAB to their launch pads by the crawler transporter, just as the Saturn V was in earlier times. An incredible machine of awesome size is used to move these giant space vehicles. It can carry 12 million pounds, and its deck is about the size of an infield of a professional baseball diamond. The crawler itself weighs 6 million pounds. The crawler's average speed is 1 mile per hour, and it requires a crew of as many as 26 to operate it. In 1977, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers designated the transporter as a National Historical Mechanical Landmark, a fitting tribute to an amazing machine. The dazzling Florida coastline is an ideal setting for viewing shuttle launch pads 39A and 39B. From here, the massive roadway that supports the crawler and its cargo is plainly visible as it stretches to the distant VAB 3.5 miles away. It's a lucky visitor indeed who is fortunate enough to be at the Space Center during a shuttle liftoff. There is no greater thrill than to witness the launch of a space vehicle such as this.
Main engine start, and the ignition, and liftoff. Liftoff of STS-7 and America's first woman astronaut. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Did that faint vibration continue through the deploy, or did it stop when you deployed?
It stopped with the deploy. The colors look good. 100, 255. 50 feet at 240. Yeah, looking good. 30 feet at 235. 20 feet at 225. 10 feet at 220. 8 feet at 215. 5 feet at 210. 2 feet at 200. 1 foot. Touchdown. 195.
With the return of your bus to Spaceport, USA, the tour of the Kennedy Space Center is complete. Through our visit, we shall have gained a better appreciation for NASA and man's accomplishments in space. We have seen the wonders of the world's greatest spaceport. It was dedicated long ago to the betterment of mankind. Today, a feeling of common interest in new frontiers is producing a hope among all nations that perhaps our world's fate lies not so much here on Earth, but on our ability to promote peace and prosperity through a common goal of space exploration.